So if I were to start making my video game today, this is what I will focus on and how I will organize my ideas and my workflow. Hi friend! If this is your first time in this channel, I am Gael and I am a solo developer working on my survival horror game called Silent Corruption. And in this channel, I share my honest journey about how it's really like being a solo game developer, as well as some behind the scenes of my game, and basically all the things I am learning along the way. So, before we jump into the video, I just wanted to give you a bit of a disclaimer because for too long I've been stuck doing this and it's a huge mistake, which is going to make you not be able to move forward with any of your creative projects. So what I'm going to share today is the way I do things and the way I would do things if I were to start over, which doesn't mean it's the only way to do things or the right way, because making a video game is a creative process, which means that there is a million ways to go about it and you should follow the way that feels right for you, which can look very different from person to person. Of course, there are a lot of things that we do similarly, but at the end of the day, you have to do you. There's a lot of people out there that they give you the step-by-step formula on how to do something, and if you follow it, you will 100% achieve what they promise, and that is always a scam in my experience, because there is no step-by-step formula to do anything, especially if you're doing something creative, because everybody has different circumstances, different resources, different brains. So what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another person. So with that said, what I'm going to share with you today is the way I do things, like I said before, which means that if there's something that I say, any tip or any recommendations that I say that you don't like or that you don't want to do, don't do it. Just take what you think is going to work for you, what resonates, and just discard the rest. And that is 100% fine, and is actually what you should be doing. You should be trusting your own instinct and what feels right for you. And if what feels right for you is very different and unique, it doesn't matter at all. Do it. Okay, so with that said, let's start with the video. Okay, so the first thing I will focus on, if you're still learning and you still figuring out what you want to do, I'm just thinking back to when I started, and like I had no idea. Obviously, I was a gamer, so I had the experience of understanding video games from the gamer point of view. But I didn't know anything about how to make video games or how games work behind the scenes. Well, just a little bit, because at that point, before I started using Unity and stuff, I used a bit of RPG Maker, so I kind of knew a bit about booleans and variables and stuff like that, but not massively. So yeah, if you are still learning, or this is the first time you're trying to make a video game, or you've been trying to make a video game for a while, or not been learning, basically you're still a beginner, the first thing I will focus on is learning skills. What do I mean by learning skills? Obviously that is very broad, so I will focus first on learning. Even if you don't like any of these two things I'm going to say, I would still say that you should learn at least the basics, because the more you understand how different areas of a video game work, the better and much easier it's going to be to integrate all the areas that you need to know to make a video game. So the first skill you should learn is like programming. With programming, the only thing you have to focus on first is pick an game engine. And I will say that you have three choices you could start with: Unity, Godot, and Unreal Engine. And obviously, I am talking here if you want to make video games not just as a hobby but as a career. If you wanna make games as a hobby, you don't need to follow any of this. You just do whatever you want. But if you're trying to make video games as a career, you need to have a bit of organization on what you should focus on first, just because it's going to make it easier to have the skills that you need to actually make the game you want. So anyways, You choose whatever engine you want. It's honestly not important what engine you have. I recommend these three because these three are the ones that have more community support right now. There's a lot of tutorials for either one of them three. They are very well, they have documentation that you can see, that you can tutorials, big communities, and yeah, I think there are these are the three easiest ones you can start with. I know there's a lot more engines out there that you can try. There's like RPG Maker, CryEngine, um, a lot more. But yeah, I think these three are a good starting point. You can always change later on, so it's absolutely not important which one you start with. And personally, I will still choose Unity just because it's an engine that have a lot of resources, a lot of assets that are free to use, and a lot of tutorials, a really big community, and the engine per se is quite beginner and user friendly. I have tried also Unreal Engine, and I personally did not enjoy working on it. And also, like, my computer is not that strong, so it couldn't handle Unreal Engine that well. So yeah, Unity or Godot is also starting to be well. It's already good. It's been already good for many years, but especially the past like 2 years, I've been saying that Godot is growing so much. So that is also a really interesting game engine, and it's also open source. So that is a big plus. But yeah, just any of these. Unity, its programming language is C sharp. Godot, you can have C sharp, GD script, that is a basically a language just for the Godot engine, or C++. And then Unreal has C++. All these three languages are very similar. So if even if you start learning one of them, for example, I know C sharp the best, I'm sure I wouldn't have much trouble learning the other because they are very similar. So it doesn't really matter which one you start learning first. Whatever piques your interest, really. So basically, start, pick one of these, whatever you feel like is the most interesting to you, and yes, start with that. And honestly, there is no right or wrong answer, no right or wrong choice. So honestly, it's not important. You're not gonna make the wrong decision. And then the other skill you should focus on is doing art, learning art. Okay? And either learn how to do 2D games or 3D. I tried doing 2D, I tried doing 3D, and I personally like doing 3D stuff a lot more. So this is honestly a personal choice. Again, you cannot go wrong with this. Whatever skill you learn 2D or 3D, they're both absolutely important. In fact, if you have enough time and energy, you can learn both because they are complementary, and what you learn in 2D helps in 3D and the other way around. So that is the first thing you should be focusing on, learning programming and art. And you don't have to be good at any of this, okay? Because first of all, you are starting and it's going to take you a long time to be good, especially if you are splitting your focus and learning different things at the same time. But that is, I guess, the downside of making a video game, especially if you're doing it on your own, and even if you are in a small team. Making a video game requires you to have a lot of different skills. So most likely you're going to be average in all those skills. It doesn't mean that your work is not gonna be good. It can still also be very good, but if you want to have a balanced set of skills, the mastering of one of them is gonna suffer a little bit. And that is fine. You still can do amazing things even if you are wearing a lot of hats. And even if you eventually focus more on just one skill, on learning one skill because you prefer to work on a bigger team instead of just trying to make a game alone, which is obviously totally acceptable, I would say that I still learn as many areas as you can, because it's really gonna help you work with other people when you understand better what a game works, like all the little things that come into making a game. It's gonna help you have better communication with your team. So yeah, all of this is still apply. And I guess like when you're learning, you're gonna be solo for a while, or with a friend, so you're still not gonna probably gonna be in in a big team to start with. So yeah, this is still very relevant. So the second thing you need to focus on, if you want to make a game yourself, is to build a prototype. And maybe you're thinking, okay, but I have no idea how to program. I have no idea how to make car. Just I don't know how to use a game engine yet. And it's not important, because you can still start working on your game even if you don't have any of these skills, okay? Because you're probably a gamer and you probably have experience already on how video games, what is a video game and what is not a video game. You understand what a video game is from the media point of view, and you can start with that. Okay, so just start with pen and paper and just write down all your ideas. How would you like your game to look like? How would you like your game to feel? And just, the all the ideas that you have in your head, write them down. And that is going to be your game design document. And this game design document, it doesn't have to be polished. It doesn't have to look pretty. It doesn't have to be extensive. It just has to be the minimum amount of words you need to understand what you want to do and to remember what you want to do. Because your game doesn't start when you start working on it in the game engine. Your game starts in your head and all the things you have in your head. And you can write it down, and that is perfectly fine. That is already working on your game, okay? And for example, if you, let's say, for example, my game, I knew from the very beginning that I wanted to have like an inventory system. I wanted to have, I wanted for it to be 3D and have like a novel over the shoulder camera, stuff like that. I kind of knew more or less how I wanted to look. So if you're still learning, maybe you can search for tutorials on how to do the stuff that you already know that is going to be in your game, and try to build the first time the simplest version of that mechanic that you want to have in your game. For example, my inventory nowadays, it looks like this. So it's basically a great inventory like, the one you have in Diablo or Resident Evil 4, where every item has like different sizes and occupies different spaces. But I wouldn't start making something so complicated to start with. I would just do maybe like a simple slot, or just simple, like you have images that you turn on and off. If you have it is enabled and it appears, and if you don't have it, it's just invisible. Something like basically a boolean on and off. So yeah, try to do your game mechanics, but like the most simple version you can do, okay? Because your focus right now, while you are starting making your game, you're building a prototype and you're learning all these skills, is on iteration, which means that you start with the most simple, small version of what you have in your head, and you make it exist first. And you make it really, really easy and really, really simple, which is already figuring out how to get there. It's not gonna be easy. So that's why you need to start with the most simple solution or version of what you have in your head. And over time, you work on it and you change things and you make a bit better. Because, like, yeah, for example, my game, it doesn't look like a finished game. It doesn't look pretty right now. I'm just making it exist for now. Like Jane, for example, the protagonist of my game, right now she looks really nice, right? But this is not the first version of that I did of her. This is like the fifth version. So, and it took me like almost a year and a half to get here, just from making just to make the model. But before that, it took me like uh maybe 2 3 years of learning, a bit more, maybe like 4 years of learning 3D stuff to have the skills to get here to this version. So yeah, while you're learning, while you're still a beginner and you're still figuring things out, just most of the time your work unfortunately is going to look very ugly, but you need to keep working on it and keep changing it and make different versions of it, and eventually you'll have it more polished and it will look better and better and better. And that is why so many people quit doing creative work and doing video games, doing art, because most of the time your work is going to suck and it's going to look ugly. It's not going to look like you want it, like the version you have in your head. And being in that moment, going through that suck part is so difficult and it's so easy to give up, and that's why so many of us procrastinate, because it's not nice to be in that spot where everything is ugly, where nothing looks like you want. So yeah, if you really wanna make video games or any creative project for that matter, you need to be aware of this. It's not gonna look nice. It's not gonna be, not necessarily not fun, but yeah, it's just gonna suck for most of it. But we keep doing it because hopefully at the end of it we'll end up with something that is worth our while. So yeah, unfortunately 80% of making a video game is just dealing with your head and dealing with your insecurities and things like that. And 20% is going to be to just work on your game. Probably not going to understand that, and it's going to take a long time for you to understand that if your art looks ugly, if your game looks ugly, it doesn't mean that you're failing. It doesn't mean that you're not good for this. It's literally the process for everybody. And if you're experiencing that, it means that you're doing it well, which is kind of ironic. Or so yeah, this is basically what I will focus on if I were to start working on my game again. I will focus on learning programming and art skills and just build my prototype from where I am, just from the most basic ideas, write them down, and just start working on the very simplified mechanics and focus on iterating and make small improvements over time. This is, even though it seems simple, it's not. It's just still a lot of things, a lot of skills that you have to learn, and that is why making a game is so difficult, because there's a ton of moving parts. By the way, if you are enjoying this video, I've got a deck community where I share more behind the scenes from making Silent Corruption, and there's also a private Discord server for solo developers like us. And you can get access to early builds and playtest my games and other projects that I'm working on, and basically see the behind the scenes of how a commercial game is actually done. So if that's something you're interested in, the link is in the description. So yeah, hope this video had helped you clarify a little bit what you should be focusing on. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below and I will do my best to answer you. And you can also send me an email. That should also be in the description if you have any doubts or anything. Again, I'll do my best to reply to your questions. Yeah, other than that, thank you very much for watching. And if you want to know more about how this solo dev journey is really like, you can click on this next video. I'll see you there. Bye!